Hello, and welcome back to another episode of My Child Left Home for Heaven. We're experiencing tons of technical difficulties here this morning, so we're just pushing through, and hopefully we'll get this one. We've been not been able to hear each other. We've been cut off in the middle of the interview, and now we're both on our iPhones trying to figure this out. So we'll just talk fast so we can get it all in, right, Christine?
That's right.
So anyway, my guest today is Christine Roe. She is the president of Bereaved Parents of USA. So talk about taking on a big role of turning your pain into purpose. It's a pretty big step. She lost her daughter Ashley to ovarian cancer, and she's been wonderful and going to come on and share her story and tell us about her organization, which has a big conference coming up in July. So welcome, Christine.
Hi.
Glad I could
Thanks for having me.
I can see and hear you now. So
Yay.
anyway, I guess let's just, go ahead and start, and you just tell us a little bit about your daughter, Ashley.
All right. Well, Ashley was my firstborn. She's the one who made me a mom. I was very young when I had Ashley. I was 21. I got married young. And she was the one who helped me grow into motherhood. I mean, she wasn't a great sleeper. As a baby, she cried a lot. We found out later that it was because she was allergic to her formula. And I spent a lot of long nights bouncing her around, taking her for rides, rocking her and walking her. And it was exhausting, but you look back now and you think what precious time that was that we had together. She loved Bobby Brown. That was the songs and the music that she liked to bounce around to. So I could probably sing those songs, over and over again, even this many years later. When she got older, she was one of the little blondies with the ringlets, the Shirley Temple curls. She had the sweetest little spirit. She instantly, when I had her brother 22 months later, she wanted to be his little caregiver. She was always wanting to help with him, always asking what he needed. She was just very sweet with him. And then she grew up fast. She grew very tall fast. In elementary school, she was sometimes feeling awkward because she was so much taller than the other kids. But middle school, they would tease her. You know how middle school kids could be. They would tease her a little bit and call her Paul Bunyan, and she was always a little bit uncomfortable. But then when she got a little older, she became tall and beautiful with, the long blonde hair, and then she was growing into a beautiful woman. So that she left that behind. She was on the pom pom squad, so she was always active at school. She always had a lot of friends. She was always having a lot of fun. But something that people really didn't know about Ashley as much as we did is that she always had a lot of pain. We were always going to doctors trying to figure out, what was going on with her. She did do the pom poms and, she was doing kick splits and all these different things. So I always thought, oh, well, she's just having growing pains, or she's just, from doing all that activity and doing all of those things with her body. She's just sore because you're going to be sore after you do those things. But she one day came to me and her fingers were all swollen and gray. And she put her hand on it and she's like, Mom, look at my fingers. And I'm like, oh, we're going to the doctor right now. And we walked in, he looked at her hands and he said, I'm going to send you to a rheumatologist, but I know that she has rheumatoid arthritis. This is like a case, a textbook case. So we found that out. And I mean, it was good to know, but it's scary too because, she was young. There's a lot of things that can happen from that. And she had to take a lot of medications, which are kind of scary medications, which, we don't know if that had something to do with, her diagnosis, because rare cancers are part of some of the things that you could get from some of those. She went to Lock Haven University after that, and college was hard for her. She studied biochem and she really wanted to, do something with that, but she had to return home because of her health. You know how they get when they're in college and they're not going to the doctor and taking care of themselves like they should. So
Exactly.
she got a little, she got behind with her care, and it started to show. She was having trouble moving and having some problems. So we eventually decided to bring her back home, and she wanted to come home. And then one weekend she said, Mom, can you take me there to see my friends? And I took her to Lock Haven, and she met the man that she was going to marry. That weekend, he actually moved out here by us not too long after that. And they got married a few years later. And I mean, just she was a lighthearted kid. She loved animals. She loved children, although she wasn't able to have any. She liked to build puzzles. She loved to read and watch movies and board games, and she loved the beach just like her mom does. You know, and she's one of those kids that you always hope that your kids will grow up and be your friend. And Ashley was definitely one of my best friends. Um, I miss her so much. I'm gonna get all choked. It's hard to put that into words. You know, like there was just such a loss from her not being here and being with me. Um, so that's a little bit about my beautiful girl.
She sounds like she was very, very sweet, and that's it. I think mother and daughter bonds are something else. God
Hmm.
blessed me with four daughters, and my relationship with each one of them is completely different. You know, it amazes me
Hmm.
how we just get along differently with each one of them. Well, then when did her how soon after then her being diagnosed with this rheumatoid arthritis and the pain going on in college? When was she diagnosed then with the ovarian cancer?
That was in April of 2018. Actually, we started that process today, in 2018. And I know that because my husband was doing taxes. He's a last minute man. And he was doing the taxes, and she had been sick. Like she had nausea, she had stomach pain. She thought maybe she had food poisoning. She had gone to a restaurant that was new, and she ordered shrimp, which she was eating a vegan diet and a low inflammation diet because she was trying to manage her arthritis. She was very healthy. She exercised, she ate well. And she thought because she hadn't had the shrimp in a long time that maybe perhaps that was what caused her to be sick. But a few days later, she was still really sick. So finally, I was at work and she sent me a message and she said, "Can you have dad take me to the ER, please?" He wasn't working at the time, so he was home. So I said, "Can you take her?" And then they were at the ER for quite a few hours. And he sent me a message, "Hey, I have to go home and finish the taxes. When you're done with work, can you go there?" And it wasn't too far. I'm a teacher. It wasn't too far from school. So I said after school, I'd stop over. And when I got there, she said, "Mom, it's weird. Since dad left, nobody has come in here."
Hmm.
And I thought, huh, that's really weird. And then, like, just like it was on cue, a doctor walked in, and I think they were waiting for me to get there because they had, scary news and they didn't want her to receive it by herself. And they said they found a mass and they needed to do an ultrasound. So after they found it, they said, well, it could be an infection. I think because she was young, she was 28 at the time. I don't think that they were thinking cancer necessarily.
Right.
They said it could be an infection, but they needed to transfer her to the larger hospital because this hospital was a part of a bigger hospital, but it's the little local branch in our area. And she was nervous, but then it was funny because the EMTs, they were taking her in an ambulance. And so they got there and they were really cute. She was
Uh-oh.
like, "I'm a mess." So I was trying to fix her hair. This is the funniest. I took a picture. I have a picture of her with this terrible bun on the top of her head. Well, she was a dancer and she was in competitive dance, so I know how to do a bun on the top of your head.
Right.
But that day, I was a nervous wreck. She's in the hospital gown. She's like, "Oh my gosh, like I have to go and I look like this." So I'm trying to make this bun on her head, and we are laughing because I'm doing a terrible job and I'm just trying to make her feel better about herself. And it was just like, it was one of those funny memories. It was a terrible, scary time, but because the two of us were together goofing around like that,
You made it
it was
fun.
really funny. It made it funny. And then they took her off. The hospital was very complicated. So at the time, the the hospital network and our insurance company, this was a big thing. I won't mention the names, but you probably there was a struggle going on between the two of them and they were kind of separating. And we were a couple months out from the date that they were going to separate. So no one at the hospital, because it was a hospital that my insurance plan was no longer going to accept in a few months, nobody at the hospital wanted to take her as a patient. So believe it or not, they gave us antibiotics, and they sent us home. And they told us to follow up with her PCP in like a week if the antibiotics weren't working. Well, since they told us it was an infection, and I was nervous because they said it was an infection they might have to do surgery that night and deal with. and they sent us home with antibiotics. So she took the antibiotics. Obviously, she wasn't feeling better. So we went to the PCP, and they took one look at the results and sent us right to a gynecological oncologist.
Mm.
Um, and that was on a Friday. We saw him on a Monday, and she had surgery the following Friday.
Wow.
She had a huge tumor the size of a grapefruit on her left ovary. When they went into surgery, I mean, we had one of the best doctors in the area. I mean, he's renowned. He's very well known for this. He told me, it could be, I don't know if it's a GIST, GIST tumor, and it could be that kind of a tumor, which the results are pretty good. But when he was done with surgery, he said he had never seen an ovary on someone that young have that much. It had a lot of fibroids. He's like, it was just, I've never seen anything like it. Um, I mean, we were in shock. I remember, holding his hand when he was taking her home. I was like, this is my baby and my best friend, and because he was just such a wonderful doctor, and he was like, I've got her. And, we were in shock, but I know Ashley and we had so much faith. I felt like it was just going to be a bump in the road, like,
You never like dreamed that this was going to be it. That this was gonna take her life. Then.
right. I just thought, this is a bump in the road. We're going to get treatments. She's young. She's going to bounce back, and it's going to be okay.
Mm.
But the treatments, I mean, they were brutal. So after she had surgery, she had 8 rounds of very intensive chemotherapy. She had it 5 days in a row for 8 hours a day.
Ah.
And then she would have like a little over a week off. I think, I can't remember the exact cycle now. It was like 10 or 12 days off. And then we would do it all over again. And her husband was a concrete, he pumped concrete. So his hours were real weird. So it was hard for him to help with her care. And so my husband and I tag teamed, and he would take her to chemo. And then after work, I would go over and relieve him and take care of them. And then at about midnight, he would come back, and I would go home and go to sleep and get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and do the whole thing all over again. But what was amazing about her, through everything, she was more worried about others than herself. Like, he would tell me stories because he did all the chemotherapy with her, that she would be at the cancer center and she'd notice somebody sitting by themselves, and she'd be like, Dad, you have to get them some water. Dad, go get this one
Oh.
a blanket. And she would be telling him to take care of all the other people because she had him there, and they didn't. Then in August, after all these treatments, it was the end of the treatments. She went for a scan. We were real nervous. She was clear, 100%,
Wow.
cancer free. We were ecstatic. We had just been gifted a trip from a group here called Jamie's Dream Team. It's almost like it's almost kind of like a Make-A-Wish, but it's a local one, and they do things for people, children of all ages. And we went on the trip. We thought that nightmare was over. We were all excited as a family, like, we beat it. We're going to start enjoying life. We're going to take more trips like this together than we've been doing, because everybody was busy with work, and we just had this like new attitude. And then in September, she started to complain about pain again. And I'm like, I wonder what's going on. She seemed very nervous about it. And then we went to the doctor, and they found spots in her liver. So that cancer had come back. It spread to her liver. And she was in and out of the hospital so much from like October and November. Like, she was always in and out of the hospital because she was in such pain, and her pain just kept getting worse and nothing helped. And they'd have to get her in there and get the pain under control. And then we go home, and then it would come back. And, but I have to say, like, even in those final weeks, she was very grateful. She was very kind to all the people that were taking care of her. I even remember like her last couple days, and I felt bad because she was in biology club in high school. And one of her buddies, this guy from biology club, was the main nurse in the ICU when she was there. He was taking care of her. And like, he would poke her or do something to her, and they would be like, I'm sorry. And she's like, it's okay. It's not your fault, you know?
Aw.
and she was just like even up to the end. And then, of course, the worst day of my life was December 2nd. That's the day that she left us.
So she was diagnosed that it had gone into her liver in August,
September.
September, and she passed in December. So it went that quick.
hmm Yeah, it just started to spread everywhere. They said that I can't remember what specific kind, there's some details that they don't matter and you just don't
Right.
remember them. But he had said that only like 8 other people had had this type of ovarian cancer. They were all between the ages of 65 and 70 years old.
Was she able to be at home with you?
I mean, it was off and on. At the very end, she was in the hospital. Um, it was after Thanksgiving. It was the first day I went back to work after Thanksgiving break, and she called me. She said, "You need to come to the house." And I went into the house. Her husband was at work, and they had a coat on their door. I let myself in. She was laying on the bathroom floor. Um, and Ashley was very clean, and there was like rolls of toilet paper and towels and things on the floor. And she was laying on the bathroom floor, and she couldn't get up. She couldn't remember if she had taken, like she was on morphine at that time. She couldn't remember if she had taken it. I got her to bed, and I called her down, and we had to take her to the hospital, and she never came home after that. She was in a regular room for one day, and then they moved her. I guess she had an episode in the middle of the night where her sugars and everything were off, and they had to take her to ICU. And she never even made it to hospice from ICU. Um, but that day, I mean, that day was hard. I mean, I stayed there with her. Somebody stayed with her every night. They had done some different things to try to help her. But I mean, I knew because I had experienced my dad passed away from cancer and we took care of him. And when you've done it once, you
I
can
know.
see,
Right.
what's happening. Like I could see that it was happening. I didn't really want to accept it. I kept praying over her, praying for a miracle. But when it came to that last day, I think her husband and my husband kind of knew it was going to be the last day, and they didn't stay. They couldn't stay. They couldn't bear to watch her go. So at first, I was alone in the room, and I was like, uh, I didn't know how I was going to handle it on my own. So my work was very, like, the people at work were very supportive of me. And I remember I sent one text message to somebody, and I said, Doug and Ryan left, and I'm here by myself. And all of a sudden, like all these friends were there. Um, I'm a special ed teacher, and all of my special ed department friends were all there. My friend Becky, who was a guidance counselor in her building at the time, she had lost her son like 7 years before, and she was in the room with me when Ashley passed. And I was like really surrounded, even though they weren't there. I really felt surrounded by love. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's the amazing thing about her passing was that there was so much love there when Ashley passed. And it was very peaceful. And Becky was in there with me, and we were telling stories about her. And that doctor was amazing. Like, he came in, he brought us coffee. Like, he was like, "What does everybody want?" And he went and bought us coffee. And like, he was just in there hanging out with us. And we were talking about Ashley and telling stories. And I was rubbing her arm. And then Becky was sitting to the left of me, and Ashley's arm was to the right. And I was rubbing her arm. She said, "Mom, how long are you going to let this go on?" And she just looked at me, and I knew what she meant, like that Ashley needed my permission.
Yes.
So I stood up and I went to Ashley. This is beautiful, but gets you choked up at the same time. So I
Right.
went up to Ashley and I was rubbing her head. So, her hair was just starting to grow back after chemo, so she had that peach fuzz. And I would always tease her. I always loved rubbing it anyway. And
Oh.
I was rubbing her head, and I said, "Honey, Mommy loves you so much, and I am so proud of you. You have fought so hard. You have been so amazing. You've been such an awesome baby. You have been everything to me, but it's time."
Mm-hmm.
I said, "Go to him. It's time." And as soon as I told her it was okay, 2 tears rolled out of her eye, and she stopped breathing. She took her last breath. Um,
I know that's hard because I was with my mom when she passed, and I mean, mothers, are not the same as a child. but all my life I'd had no warnings on deaths. My father committed suicide. My sister, not even a year later, died of a pulmonary embolism, so no warning whatsoever. Then my daughter, no warning whatsoever. And I actually just finished writing a book on grief, and that's how I talk about the different forms and how the three that were in shock, and it just took my body forever to actually like accept what was going on. Yet with my mother, to lay there in bed with her, and we were singing Frank Sinatra. My sister was singing Frank Sinatra, "Fly Me to the Moon." We actually had snuck. I don't know if I should say this on the podcast, but we actually snuck some vodka up there because my mom liked vodka. And my sister and I, at that point, after 5 nights, I'm sure you can remember what it's like. You're just sitting there day in and day out, and we
Mm-hmm.
were drinking a little bit of vodka and iced tea. Rub some on your mom's lips if your mom liked that. And we're like, well, she likes Bloody Marys, and they went and got some tomato juice, and they made it a beautiful experience. And I never thought death could be beautiful, but in a way it can. And I think when we know where our loved one's going, and we know our loved one's in pain, and
Mm-hmm.
more than anything in the world. And I appreciate you so much sharing her story. I know that's very, very hard. And I love each parent that I talk to because I feel like I get to know a little bit about your child. And I kind of carry your child with me in my heart. And I should have asked you if you could have held up a picture of her. Do you have a picture of her handy?
I have like my phone, yeah.
Oh, very good.
Because
You could hold up a
she's always
picture of
there.
her.
This is a bunch of different pictures of her.
Oh,
So
you,
at the
oh,
top, you
look at
can
that
see her
hair.
little ringlets. And then when she got older, that's her wedding picture. And then
Oh, she's
there's her and
beautiful.
her wedding, and her with her favorite dog, Cooper. She
Oh,
loved Cooper. Um, yeah. But like you were saying, there's a lot of beauty in it. To be there. I've had friends lose, and I talk to people who have lost children and they didn't get to say goodbye. And I don't think obviously, neither one of them is good, but the being able to be there with her and hold her, talk to her, and tell her all of those things that I was able to tell her as a gift. And, I brought her into the world, and then I was there when she left,
right,
and there's something very beautiful about that. I wouldn't change that part for anything, no matter how difficult it was. And then, like I said, people were just surrounded. Like we were there for a long time afterwards. The doctor came back, and we were all there with her. It was a beautiful way after all of her pain for her to go.
right.
Um,
Yeah, and I
I wouldn't
thought
change
that
that.
I was able to stay with my daughter's body. I got there after, she was already pronounced dead, but they took the coroner over an hour to get there for her, and I was able to sit with her alone in the room. The sheriff had to stay with me. They can't leave you completely alone.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest of no one else in my family wanted to come in. They all stayed outside. But I kind of felt the way like what you just said. I brought her into the world, and even though I know she was already gone, they say that the brain is the last thing, or the hearing is the last thing to go. So I sat and I sang to her and I talked to her, and
Mm-hmm.
it was the same way. I mean, there are babies, and the thing that, like, I remind myself, and I think that's why as moms we grieve so differently than dads do. We still have our child's DNA inside of us. I mean, we carry them
Mm-hmm.
with us for the rest of our lives, and when they pass, I don't think people understand. We're a special breed of women. Friends that haven't lost a child have a hard time understanding us. It's a feeling that until you've experienced it, unfortunately, and had to go through it, you just don't understand what it's like. It's a heartache that just never stops.
And
And
we
that.
wouldn't want anybody to understand.
No, and I've said that
Mm-hmm.
I remember, and I've told the story on my podcast before. We live on the intercoastal waterway here in Florida, and a few days after my daughter died, I walked out on the dock and I screamed at the top of my lungs, "Why, God? Why, Emily? Why?" And I mean, the neighbors even called the police. They thought I was suicidal and was going to jump in the water. I had so much frustration. And I'm telling you, I mean, as clear as could be. And I mean, God usually speaks to me through music. Music is the biggest way. And sometimes scripture, but it's usually music that he speaks to me. But I'm telling you, as clear as could be, I could hear in my head, "Why not your Emily? Who else, Kelly?" And that put me to my knees at that moment. Then, no, is there anyone else? And I've had several of my friends who have lost their children since I lost Emily, and going through it with them, just no, you wouldn't wish this on Anybody. But you're a strong warrior, Mom. There's a whole breed of us out there, and I think that we need to share our stories more to be able to help these moms that are still struggling so much. So your daughter passed in 2019 then?
18
Okay.
in December of
So right before 2000.
2018.
Okay. So yeah,
Hmm.
my daughter passed in 2018 also. So we're about the same place on our grief journeys, I call them, and
Hmm.
still the waves up and down. I don't think that
Yeah.
ever goes away. But so what got you started with Bereaved Parents of USA?
Well, Ashley always used to say, get up, dress up, and never give up throughout her sickness. And to get me out of bed every day, I put it on her funeral card. It's on her headstone. And I would look at that to get me out of bed. And even on the darkest days, like I would feel her pushing me, pushing me, pushing me. Um, so I went back to work right away. My friend Becky encouraged me because she didn't do it that way and she didn't want to see the same thing happen to me that happened to her. And so part of that getting up and getting moving is like I have to find ways to help myself. I can't sit here and let this happen to myself. So I went to church and I did like the grief groups at church, but and I really pushed into like small groups and things at church. And but the problem was I wasn't finding people like me. So
Exactly.
when I went
Even
to
at
those
Grief Share, I know our
no,
church was mainly widows and widowers. You know, no
exactly.
one lost a child, so they couldn't relate to me
They
whatsoever.
couldn't relate.
Mm-mm.
And although, I mean, there were helpful things that I
Huh.
took from it, but like you said, it was widows and widowers, and it was people who had lost their parents.
Right.
And it really, it gave me something, but it wasn't giving me enough. So I started searching online, and I found that there was a Compassionate Friends chapter in Pittsburgh, but it was in the city, and I live in the northern suburbs of Pittsburgh, and the north side of Pittsburgh is not a good area. And
I
I
grew up in
knew,
Town, Ohio, so I know
oh,
Pittsburgh
okay,
very,
yeah,
very well.
yeah, the north side isn't a good area, and I didn't want to go there by myself at night to go to a meeting, and there was just not really anything by me. So I was searching online, and I found Bereaved Parents of the USA, and I called them. It was probably early 2021. Um, and so it was almost 3 years after losing her, maybe 2.5 years. And I just talked to them a little bit, and I was getting a push. You know how you get like those little
I
pushes,
know
like
you're
you
supposed
should
to do
start a
something.
chapter. You should start a chapter. I'm like, I can't do this. And my brain was telling me to say, well, I'd like to start a chapter in my area. And I'm like, what did I just do? So, I went through a process with them, and then around her birthday, um, I charted a chapter here. I had to find some other people to join me. So I found my friend Michelle, who her daughter danced with Ashley. She had lost her son Connor a few years prior to me losing Ashley. And I talked to her and I said, would you help me with this? And she lost her son to a distracted driver. So she's very involved with an organization for distracted driving. And then she brought on her friend Pam on Dash, who is very involved with MAD. And the three of us and my husband chartered our chapter. And I really feel that, helping others is what has really carried me through.
Definitely.
Um, yeah, because you lose a lot of friends, you lose a lot of family
Yeah.
because they don't understand. But this
They're
community
afraid to
has
be around
become,
you. I
yeah,
I really, and I have a few close friends who have stuck by me, and I thank them all the time because I say I know it hasn't been easy. I've watched people run into me in the stores, and they'll like go out of their way to get away from me because they just don't.
right.
They're so afraid of saying the wrong things to us that they'd rather not say anything at all, and they don't understand that's the absolute worst thing to do for us.
Right. And so like that's I just found my people, and then I just kept getting more involved. So then they realized that I was good with technology because I did a few things and they're like, "Can you start doing our Facebook?" And then they realized I can write and it's like, "Could you help us with this?" And everything that they asked me to do for national, I'm like, "Okay, I can do that. Okay, I can do that." And then they said, "Would you be on the board?" And I said, I really, would you run to be on the board? And I said, I really don't think I have time for that. But then I was getting that little mental push again, like, you need to do this. So before you knew it, I was filling out the application and I ran to be on the board. And then the next thing I was vice president. And then this year the president resigned and I ended up. president. So
Well,
it was, but it was,
congratulations.
it was all a little push, like it pushed. It wasn't me.
That was
I'm kind
Ashley and God pushing you, is what it was.
right, and I'm just learning, you know, as I go and doing the best I can. And I know that if my main goal is to serve people, and help people, it's gonna work out,
Well,
you
tell
know.
us about your conferences coming up in July. And I feel bad. I've been to Compassion. I actually spoke at Compassionate Friends in Denver 2 years ago. Last year, Sherry Reber, that I'm friends with here locally,
Mm-hmm.
she was trying to get me to come to the one last year, but it was in Washington, and I was actually supposed to go for Trail of Truth. And my husband was like, "You're not flying up to Washington like within a 3 week period of time." And now this year, I'm crossing my fingers because of being in Pittsburgh, and I actually have a plane ticket going into Pittsburgh that I need to use before August.
Oh,
So
perfect.
I haven't brought it up to my husband in July for the conference. So tell us about it.
Well, first of all, there's just something special about that conference. So I had never gone to one, and then they were kind of pushing me. And when I first attended, it was just amazing. I was so afraid at first because I didn't know what to expect, and I was scared. And when you're grieving, the thought of walking into a room with all that pain,
It's
I'm like,
terrifying.
how overwhelming is this going to be? But what I found when I went was comfort. I found connection with people. I made friends from all over. And I found something that I haven't had in a long time, which was hope. Um, so I really encourage people, if you're afraid, because like, just do it. You can always take a break, but being there was such a difference for me. This year, like you said, we're holding it in Pittsburgh. It's from July 25th through 27th. Um, and it's a place where there's powerful workshops. We have some very inspiring keynote speakers. I'll talk about them a little bit in a bit. And we also are showing a critically acclaimed documentary. We have a screening of it. It's called The Ocean 5 Years, which it's a very beautiful, it's getting all kinds of awards, but it captures the complexities of like grief and love. Just overall, the gathering is a space where you can be in the presence of people who really understand. And I don't think you can't take that for granted because you don't always have an opportunity to be around people that really get you.
Well,
So,
Sherry explained to me also because, and not to say anything against Compassionate Friends, but it was so big. It was very
mhm,
very hard for me. And like I said, even though I was holding a workshop there, I just never felt like I connected with anybody. It was just very overwhelming to me. And when I came home and Sherry was asking me how it was, and that's what she told me. She said, "No, you need to come to Bereaved Parents of USA." She goes, "We're not so large, so it's not so intimidating." And so
absolutely.
that's why again, that's why I'm anxious to try and see. I'm a little bit more outspoken these days. And again, I think we season with our grief, so we're not so nervous about situations like that. But in case someone's listening that's has never attended anything like that and wants to, this, from what I understand, your conference is perfect because of it being smaller groups.
Right. And it is smaller. We usually have 200 to 250. I think the Compassionate Friends usually has between 800 and 1,000 people. So that is a big difference, especially if you're not comfortable. And I really encourage people, in addition to attending the workshops, getting the meal plan, because you might think that, oh, I can just grab food or whatever, but the meals are more than just meals. So that's where I met a lot of the people that I got to be close to, because you can sit wherever you want. And I feel like um, you can't really talk to people when you're in the workshops because the
Right.
workshop's going on, but you can find somebody that you made a connection with in the meal, and you can sit with them and you can talk to them and you can get to know them. And then I've made a lot of friends that are still my friends today from all of these different gatherings from doing that. And I think people underestimate the value of just that connection of eating together and breaking bread together.
Right.
Um, and the keynote speakers take place right after that. So one of the keynote speakers we have is Tiffany McConaughey, and she is Mrs. Arkansas. she lost her daughter Nora to pediatric cancer. And she's started Nora's Legacy Project, and she has a podcast, also has a podcast called The Unexpected Flight. So I'm very much looking forward to her. We also have Sarah Snyder, she founded the Bowen Walker Foundation, and that's a nonprofit that supports bereaved siblings nationwide. She also was very integral in helping after the shooting at the Appalachian High School.
Yes.
Yeah, in Georgia. Was it Georgia? She was very instrumental in helping them with that. We have Michael Straley, who is the founder of Leah's Legacy Foundation, and he has done a lot of talks on the opioid crisis, even to Congress and at the Pennsylvania State Capitol. And then we have Susan Whitmore, and Susan is the CEO of Grief Haven. And she's a bereaved mother. She lost her daughter to cancer at the age of 32. And she started this organization because she couldn't find resources. So she puts a lot of resources in one place after she lost her child. And she does a lot of work with grief in the brain. So she does a lot of research with grief in the brain. And then as our special guest, we have the McCutcheons, which I said we're going to screen The Ocean 5 Years, which was written by Brett McCutcheon after he lost his brother. And he wrote a 5-song EP of music. He's a composer about his brother's death. And when they were going to make a video about it, the person who was making the video said this needs to be a documentary. So that was made into a documentary. So they are going to be there, him and his dad. And his dad owns the Bolt Music Studio. And they also started a foundation, a member of their son that passed away, called the Rhythm 19 Fund here in Pittsburgh. So we have a really nice lineup of
Like it. Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful.
keynote speakers and the workshops. We're still collecting. Today's the last day to apply for a workshop. So, if you're coming, and we would love to have you do a workshop if you're coming, but
No, I'd like to come just to enjoy it, because I'm actually going to talk one of my girlfriends into coming. So
oh,
I know Sherry,
awesome.
every year Sherry goes, "Do you want to do a workshop, Kelly?" And next year possibly, but this year I think I need to. Like sometimes I'm in a season right now where I need fed again,
Right,
and
absolutely. And you have
so,
to do that.
right. So no, and that's why I said I really would like to bring one of my friends up that just lost her daughter. She's just hasn't even been a year yet, and she's really, really struggling, and I think it would help her out greatly. Well, I am going to post in the bio of this podcast on my website, or when anybody brings it up on Spotify or Apple platforms, I'll have all the links that if they're interested in attending. And then if by chance, you're listening and you can't find the links or something, you can always just email me at mychildlefthomeforheaven.org, and I will share those links with you also. When is the cutoff for being able to purchase a ticket?
You could purchase one up to the last minute, although we don't recommend that. Let me look at our dates. Give me 1 second, because I don't, this girl can remember.
What hotel are you staying at there then?
We are at the Pittsburgh Airport Marriott, which is a beautiful hotel that
Yes, it
was
is.
just recently renovated. It's all brand new, so it's amazing, the hotel.
You've got rooms blocking. I mean, they're giving a little
We have a
discount.
special price. It's
Perfect.
125, I believe, a night, but there
Oh,
is
that's not bad
limited.
at all.
No, it's limited space, so you want to make sure that you book your hotel room soon. Early bird registration ends June 1st, so you get a little bit. Early bird registration is $80, and our conference really is quite reasonable when you compare the prices to some of the other similar conferences out there. After June 1st, it will be $100. Um, and like I said, we recommend that you do that in advance.
Okay. Well, hopefully we'll get this. I'll be airing this next week. We'll get this message out and get the word around to everybody. Now, also, just if someone's wanting to look for, maybe they cannot attend the conference and they want to find a local chapter, how would they go about doing that?
You can go to our website. It's bereavedparentsusa.org, and you can click the Find a Chapter button. And when you click the Find a Chapter button, all the available chapters will pop up by state. There's also a variety of chapters who do virtual meetings. If you don't see one in your state, you can go down to the end of the website and you'll see virtual meetings that are available. And then when you click on those, there'll be the email and the phone number of the chapter leader, and you can reach out to that person and they will get back to you. And if anybody ever has any trouble with that, they can always just reach out directly to me. It's president at bereavedparentsusa.org,
Okay,
and
do
they
you,
can
if I
reach
put
out.
that in the bio, your email
You
also?
can put it in there. Anybody is welcome to reach out to me. On the website, we also have a contact form. If they don't hear back from anybody at one of the chapters, they could fill out the contact form. So there's lots of ways to get in touch with us. But I'm always welcome, and open to talking to anyone. They don't have to worry about reaching out to me. I'm not like, oh, I'm the president and I'm not going to
All
talk
right.
to you. That's just
Well,
silly.
thank you, Christine. I think God's definitely put you in the right role with having you be president this year.
Well,
So I
thank
think that's
you.
wonderful, and I really hope I get a chance to meet you in person.
I hope
I'm
so.
leaving for out of the country for 3 weeks next week, and I was going to wait till I was like halfway through the trip with my husband to then tell him that I wanted to go to Pittsburgh in July and see how, because I have to be back up to Youngstown in August. So you know how summer times are, just busy kind of flying around and that
Hmm.
quite a bit. So anyway, but I really want to make it up and look forward to it. So well, thank you. I appreciate again so much you sharing. Ashley's story. I know that's it's hard for every mom, but I know that every time one of you moms tells your child's story, someone's listening and you're touching the heart of a mom who just doesn't know how to put it in words yet. So if there is a mom out there like that, or mom that's newly bereaved and is just really struggling, do you have any final words that you'd like to share with them, since you're 6 years into, almost 7 years into your grief journey also now?
I just say we're proud of you. It is a struggle. It's hard every day, but you get up, dress up, like Ashley would say,
I
and
like
you
that
keep
saying.
going. You get up, dress up, and keep
Keep going.
going. And you honor your child the best that you can, and know that you're not doing it alone. Like there's groups like ours and other groups and people like Kelly who are here to help you, and you can't be afraid to reach out and get that support that you need. Even a little while down the road, we all need, as Kelly said a little earlier, there's years when we just need to be fed.
Mm-hmm.
And we need things like this. So don't be afraid to reach out to people and get the help and the support that you need.
Great words of advice there. And I'm going to probably start using Ashley's little quote here a little bit, if that's okay with you.
So you
I'll
can
give her,
use it.
I'll put by Ashley in little
Well,
quotation
I
marks.
don't think she came up with it. I think she
No, but
found it,
it's,
but she
it's,
just kept using it and it sticks with me all the time.
unfortunately, my Emily had some sayings, but I couldn't use those ones publicly. My Emily was a rebel, so I wouldn't be able to use some of hers. I'm sure she had some cute ones in there somewhere. It's funny. I'll have to start thinking of them. But thank you so much, Christine, for sharing your time with us today on your spring break. We appreciate it very, very much.
Well, thank you.
All right. Bye bye.
Bye.